All right, I want to welcome everyone here tonight to our chapter 34 of Ezekiel. And my name is Steve Sheik. I'm a congregation leader at Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas. So let's go ahead and get started tonight with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. All right, so tonight we'll just start right on into it. This lesson tonight, this class, this prophecy is just on the same. It's on the heels of last week. There's no time lapse between the two. And we are in chapter 34. And so let's get right into it. So the word of Adonai came to me saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to those shepherds, thus says Adonai Elohim, Oi, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of themselves, should shepherds not take care of the sheep? So what we got here is that God is not talking to a particular occupation of people, unless you realize that he's talking to the leaders, the kings, the high government officials, the priests, and so forth. God gave Ezekiel a message for the leaders, the rulers of Israel, and ancient Near Eastern literature and so forth referred to kings and leaders as shepherds, and you see that in Numbers, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micah, Zechariah, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of history there and a lot of usage of the word. Prophets and priests were also called shepherds, but here what we have is the kings that are also in view, and I think you'll see that the priests were also part of this judgment. God pronounced judgment on them for three reasons. First, they fed themselves rather than the people, and they were selfish. They were more interested in providing for themselves than for the people who God had placed in their care, and they exploited their followers. So, if you have there's a review of northern kingdom of the northern kingdom of Israel. Those rulers, there never was in the northern kingdom. There never was not one single godly king, and conversely, over in the southern kingdom, there were 3 or 2 of them, but not very many. And Ezekiel, he wasn't impressed with them. In fact, he pointed out that Judah was worse than her sister Israel. He said that up in chapter 23. So they had to be bad for Ezekiel to call them out like that. Said, you eat the fat, you clothe yourselves with the wool, you kill the fat ones, but you do not take care of the sheep. You do not strengthen the weak, heal the sick, bind up the broken, bring back the stray, or seek the lost. Instead, you have ruled over them with force and cruelty. They were scattered for lack of a shepherd. They became food for all the beasts of the field as they were scattered. My sheep wandered through all the mountains and on every high hill over all the face of the earth. My sheep were scattered. No one searched, no one sought. So specifically here, these unfaithful shepherds, they ate the best parts of the sacrifices rather than offering them to God. And you read about that in 1 Samuel, 2nd chapter, the story of Eli's son, or Eli's sons, who not only did they just eat the fat, their servants would go and take the fat from the people who were bringing the animals in, and said, "Give me the fat." And if they didn't want to, they said, "You're either going to give it to me or I'll take it by force." And so, I mean, it was a racket. They were racketeering. And so these unfaithful shepherds, then they used wool. They used the wool of the sheep. They would shear the sheep rather than to sacrifice them, so they could use the wool to make clothing or sell or whatever they were doing with it, rather than sacrificing these animals, or using them as a sacrifice to the Lord. Because quite frankly, if they were to shear them, probably they would nick them, and then they would not be suitable for sacrifices. And so that's another thing they did. And secondly, they rather than feeding God's sheep, they slaughtered them. They, again, talking about people here, they slaughtered them. They were oppressive. They had not restored those people that needed restoring, or they had not gone after the ones that had wandered away and need finding. And they dominated God's flock rather than providing loving, self-sacrificial leadership. And so the primary responsibility of a leader is to take care of the needs of those he leads, even if it requires sacrificing his own desires. Now, there's a couple of us here that spent some time in uniform, and one of the things that I learned, long time ago was, you take care of your people first. You make sure that your troops have all they need, and that they have good food. And when I was on ships, I made sure that the crew and the officers, we ate the same thing. In some places the officers ate better than the crew. Not on any of my ships. I always made sure that our enlisted people ate exactly what the officers did. I tried to take care of all of the people. When you do that, the people will take care of you too. And so it's just something that even today, when we have oneg at synagogue, I always make sure that everyone is fed before I go through the line. And then that way, and what, I have never yet missed anything. That every once in a while something good will be gone by the time I get there, but there's plenty of other things there. So it's okay. And you can tell by my waistline, I don't miss too many things. So, but that's just a mark of a proper leader, is you take care of your people. So thirdly, now in verses 5 and 6, it said the rulers allowed the people to scatter over the earth instead of keeping them safely together. They were negligent. The Israelites kind of scattered because they lacked leadership, and they became prey for the enemies of God's flock. These people, they weren't getting protection from their own local people, and so they wandered off everywhere. But there was really no one to seek them out and see, well, why is this village just depopulating, and going out and checking on the welfare of the people of Israel. Nobody did that. And so you can kind of compare that with Yeshua's story about the shepherd that goes out, and one is lost, and he leaves the 99 of them to go out and search for that one that's lost. These leaders were not doing that. So verse 7 and 8, therefore, shepherds, hear the word of Adonai. As I live, it is a declaration of Adonai. As surely as my sheep become prey, and my sheep become food for all the beasts of the field, because there was no shepherd, nor did my shepherds search for my flock, but the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed my sheep. More to come. So the Lord repeated his accusations against Israel's leaders, and then he announced what he planned to do about the situation in verses 9 through 31. We'll read those in a minute. So these false prophets They needed to listen to God's word to them, because they had let the Israelites become prey for their enemies. They were not protecting the people in these outlying villages, so that they were subject to the Moabites, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, and all the different ones that surrounded Israel. It was these frontier cities that really, in some frontier villages, that took the brunt of any hostilities against Israel. And the people and the leaders in Jerusalem said, meh, they just didn't go out there and bother themselves protecting these people. So surely the people then scattered to where they could possibly live in peace. And that's contrast that then with what the Lord said, in John 10 and 10 and 11. He says, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And so none of these fat cats in Jerusalem would lift a finger to help the people in the frontiers and the hinterlands against aggressive neighbors or just bandits or whatever, or wild animals. They didn't go out and do a tiger hunt or anything like that. So therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Adonai. Thus says Adonai Elohim, behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will demand my flock from their hand. I will dismiss them from tending the flock. The shepherds will no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my sheep from their mouth, so they will not be food for them. So God swore to oppose the shepherds, to hold them accountable for his sheep, to stop them from leading them. He was going to take them out of leadership positions. That's exactly what happened in the exile. He was going to rescue his sheep, his people, from their influence. And so you remember what Yeshua told his people, his disciples. He says, you know that the rulers of the nations lord it over them, and their great ones play the tyrant over them. It shall not be this way among you, but whoever wants to be great among you, you shall be your servant. Whoever wants to be great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you shall be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So that's the comparison of what the ideal would have been, and as opposed to what actually did happen with the various leaders of Judah in Jerusalem. And so it was for that reason that the Lord was not at all pleased with them. And so, for thus says Adonai Elohim, here I am. I myself will search for my sheep and seek them out. As a shepherd seeks out his sheep on the day he is among the scattered flock, so I will seek out my sheep. I will rescue them out of all the places where they've been scattered on a day of cloud and thick darkness. All right, so God further promised to search out for his wandering sheep himself. He was going to do this himself, to care for them, to deliver them from the places that they've been scattered, in gloomy days, those days of national distress and so forth. So there's quite a few references in the word that point to God as being Israel's shepherd, and you see that in back in verse 6. He's talking about that, and in Psalms 23, of course, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd," and Psalms 80:2 says, "Shepherd of Israel, you who lead Joseph like a flock." There's that title again, the shepherd of Israel. Isaiah 40:11. Like a shepherd, he tends his flock. And then Jeremiah 31:10. He who scattered Israel will gather and watch over him as a shepherd does his flock. So those are all references that we see in the Old Testament regarding God and his functioning as a shepherd of Israel. Ezekiel 34:13 and 14. I will bring them out from the peoples. I will gather them from the countries. I will bring them back to their own land. I will shepherd them upon the mountains of Israel, by the streams, and in all the habitable places of the land. I will shepherd them in a good pasture. Their grazing place will be on the high mountains of Israel. There they will lie down on good grazing ground. They will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. Yeah. So we see here that God is he's going to lead the Jews out from among the people where they'd gone, and some of them in exile, and some of them just trying to seek a better place, and then bring them back into their own land. An example of leaving Israel would be the story of Naomi and her husband and two boys, where there was a famine in the land, and so they went over into Moab, where they heard that there was better provision, better food. The famine, the drought was not in the land of Moab like it was in Israel. So they migrated out of Israel. And there's a lot of people that migrated out of Israel for one reason or another, but God said he's going to bring them back. He said he would nourish them on the mountains beside the streams, in the inhabited places of the land. And so they would have good pasture and experience rest and good grazing ground. And he said, even the richest pasture of the land. I don't know about some of y'all, but to me, one of the finest views in all the world is to look out over a nice green lush pasture with a bunch of cows out there. Now I guess that's my Texas upbringing, but to me that is the vision of peace and safety and security and just goodness. Is you're looking out there and see a bunch of cows, and they don't even have to be big old hybrid cows. They can be just Longhorns, Angus, Charolais, Limousin, Beefmasters, or just an old run-of-the-mill cow. It's just, to me, that is just a great scenery, and I love to see that. And so, and here's God saying, I'm going to give you that land, and that I have all of those cows out there in the pasture, or the goats and the sheep and so forth out there in the pasture. So, we look at this part of Ezekiel, and a lot of people want to say, well, a lot of this is metaphor, and it's not to be taken literally. But we know that the scattering of Israel was definitely literal. It did happen. Israel was decimated, and they took the people out. And so then, if that was literal, then you can take it on God's word that he's going to bring them back. And so we're still seeing our people come back to Israel, even now, from all different parts of the world. And it will continue right up until he brings them all. So I will tend my flock and make them lie down. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will seek the lost, bring back the stray, and I will bind up the broken and strengthen the sick, but the fat and the strong I will destroy. I will tend them with justice. the sovereign Lord himself would feed his flock. I mean, here he is. He's gonna feed them. He's gonna take personal responsibility to lead the flock to rest. One of the things that a shepherd does is lead his flocks from a place where maybe there's not enough food to another place where there is food. That's an important function of a good shepherd, is that he's always on the lookout for green pastures, someplace that he can bring his flocks to. And so the Lord said he would seek those that are lost and return all the scattered. He would heal the broken and strengthen the sick people, and he would destroy the fat, strong shepherds who had failed him by punishing them. So we remember some of these scriptures, like in Isaiah 61, that the Lord said, this is, of course, the famous one: the Spirit of Adonai Elohim is on me, because Adonai has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of Adonai's favor and the day of our God's vengeance, to comfort all who mourn. All right, and that is, if you remember right, that is a scripture that Yeshua quoted when he was in the synagogue at Capernaum, and he was invited to read from the Haftarah portion for that particular Shabbat, and that's the one that he read, and he read right out of Isaiah. And in Micah 2:12, it says, "I will surely gather Jacob, all of you. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together like sheep in a pen, like a flock within its pasture. They will be noisy with people." And that, to me, that imagery of, bringing people together, and if you've ever done like family reunions or something like that, once everybody gets in there and they're all talking, and it's just a lot of noise. You can also see that in the foyer there at Tree of Life every Shabbat, where people get in there and start talking, and it gets really, really noisy. It's a good thing. It's a good feeling. It's a great thing when the people of God get together, and that's where Micah is talking here about. They will be noisy with people because they're just getting together and talking with each other. So in verse 17, it says, "As for you, my flock, thus says Adonai Elohim, behold, I will judge between sheep and sheep, between rams and male goats. Was it too little for you that you were feeding in the good pasture? Must you trample down the rest of your pastures with your feet? You were drinking clear water. Must you muddy the rest with your feet? Yet my sheep will eat what you have trampled with your feet, and drink what you have muddied with your feet." So now this one's a little strange. Okay, I got to admit, where the leaders now, they were in exile, or shortly going to be. In fact, this discourse was written this discourse was given the night before the couriers came with the message that Jerusalem had fallen. And so there were already a lot of leaders who were in captivity in Babylon. And so now here they were just like everybody else. They were no longer leaders. They were deposed, and they were just like everybody else, and they had no authority over anything. And so the Lord announced that he was going to distinguish between the members of the flock and judge them individually. So what he's saying here, the Lord viewed these exilic, the leaders that are in exile, as sheep among his sheep rather than as shepherds. They were no longer shepherds. They'd been demoted to sheep. And so they were in reality, even though they at one point might have been leaders, they were still God's sheep, but now they're sheep. Okay, they're just like everybody else. And some of these leaders had not only eaten good pasture and drunk good, clean, clear water, but through their actions, they made it impossible for the other sheep to eat good food and drink good water. And so, the ordinary sheep, the weaker sheep, the younger sheep, the old, the infirm, whatever, they had to just get by with trampled grass and muddy water. And so, they had to survive somehow, and they did, but it just wasn't good. And the Lord said, I'm going to take care of that. So he said, therefore, thus says Adonai Elohim to them, behold, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep, because you thrust with your side and your shoulder, and you gore all the weak with your horns until you have scattered them all over. I will save my flock. They will no longer be prey. I will judge between sheep and sheep. God was going to judge between the fat and the lean sheep, between those who had fed themselves and kept others from eating, and those who had to exist on poor food and drink. He was going to take care of that. He was going to make that distinction. And because some of God's sheep, they suffered at the hands of their fellow sheep, they pushed and shoved them around and so forth. The Lord's going to deliver even the weak people, the weak sheep, the weak people. But he would distinguish between the two. Every man was going to be judged by his actions. And so he would deliver his people from the poor, from poor leaders. He was going to deliver them from poor leaders, as well as from predatory nations. So, but again, he's going to judge each one individually, and they will get what is due them. So I will set up one shepherd over them, my servant David. He will tend them, he will feed them himself and be their shepherd. I, Adonai, will be their God, and my servant David will be a prince among them. I, Adonai, have spoken. Now, the Lord promised to set over his sheep just one shepherd, and in contrast to the many bad shepherds that they'd had for 500 years, in the two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, he was going to set up his servant David. Now, he said, who would personally feed them. The Lord would be their God, and his servant David would be his prince. Now, in the Hebrew, the word is nasi, and that's that is a term that, okay, he's talking about a king, but it's also generally, it was generally like a prince or a leader in the synagogue, or in the just the Hebraic setup that came out of the exile. They had in the Sanhedrin, they had two people, and they led the Sanhedrin, and one of them was called the Nasi, and so that would have been, he would have been like the prince of the Sanhedrin, or the head of the Sanhedrin. It's kind of an honorific title, and so the Lord promised then that he was going to give them David. Now, Ezekiel used that word Nasi in place of Melech, which is the normal Hebrew word for king. And he did that in order to stress to the exiles that okay, this was not a hereditary king. This was someone, the Nasi had been put on the throne. So God was going to put the Nasi, the prince. And so he's also comparing the kingship of David within the later kings who were lesser. They were simply princes. They were Nasi. They were not like David. So they're said God himself would shepherd the sheep, and then he promises that his servant David would shepherd them. And so it seems clear that a God man is in view here, I would think. And so 20 out of Ezekiel's 38 uses of Nasi refer to the coming Messiah. So I think we can say that God is talking about, Ezekiel's talking about then a coming Messiah. So did God mean that he would raise David from the dead to lead the Israelites again? Well, no, I don't think so. He probably meant that someone from David's descendants would lead them. And and there actually are some people says, oh no, God may just very well bring David back to life, because here he was. Remember, he was like, the quintessential shepherd king. And so he was the model shepherd of sheep and the model king of Israel. He was the best there was in the terms of being a king of Israel, even with all of his faults and so forth. People considered him the best. So David was the man that God chose, and he was the man after God's own heart, and he's the one that triumphed over all of his enemies, and Israel was at peace during his last days, and he extended the kingdom in every direction. And so all of Israel was united under David. So sure, why not? So the identity of this David may have been, Ezekiel didn't know who this was. It's obvious that he didn't know what this or who this David was. He was repeating what the Lord was telling him. And so, but now we know it with 2020 hindsight that, of course, we're talking about the Messiah. The Yeshua was going to be born from the Davidic line, both on his mother's side, Miriam, and on his stepfather's side, Yosef. And so both sides they were from the Davidic line, from the tribe of Judah. So in a sense, then the Yeshua, the Good Shepherd and the Son of David, is in view here. But this saying here kind of removes it then from the literal sense and the literal setting that was, because then Yeshua came 400 or 500 years later at the turn of the millennium. And then we also know that his throne is going, and he did not establish a earthly kingdom. His was going to be a heavenly kingdom. And so we know that then it will be that second coming, that second advent, is when he's going to sit on the throne of David. So eventually all of Israel will come to recognize Yeshua as the Messiah. I will make a covenant of shalom with them. I will remove the evil beast from the land, so that they may dwell safely in the wilderness and sleep in the forest. Now, the themes of regathering as sheep and the covenant, all of that, it kind of merges here in these verses 25 to 31. And so the Lord had also promised to make a covenant of peace, which resulted in peace with Israel. This is probably a reference to the new covenant that God promised to make with Israel in the future. Again, with Ezekiel here, there's a fine line. Sometimes he's talking about tomorrow, and sometimes he's talking about tomorrow, way in the distance. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to figure some of them out. Now, some commentators believe that this covenant is not the same as the new covenant, with Yeshua. And I think of course, the new covenant was inaugurated with Yeshua, and now it governs all believers. And then when Israel repents of a nation, then Israel will then be grafted in, or included back into the main natural branches that and the blessings and the peace and everything that God has promised to his people. And this is certainly in no way, shape, or form a reference to the fact that the church has replaced Israel, because I don't believe that at all. Israel is always going to be Israel. Israel is always going to be God's chosen people, and the non-Jewish people who believe in Yeshua are grafted into the commonwealth of Israel. When you become a believer, you do not become a Jew. You're still a Gentile, and that's God's plan. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's, God doesn't make mistakes. He made you a Gentile or made you a Jew for whatever purpose it was. And however you find yourself, hey, just be glad that Yeshua gave his life for you, and you accepted him, and now you're part of the kingdom, whether you were grafted in or whether you were born into it. Even those that are born into it, if they don't accept Yeshua, the Lord says he'll cut that branch out. So it's important that we make sure that we are believers in Yeshua. So the word peace here is used to describe the harmony that exists in covenant obligations, when covenant obligations are fulfilled and the relationship is good. When a sovereign conquered a nation, and then they had this covenant, and if the conquered people lived up to the covenant, then there was peace. He was bound to keep them safe from other invaders or whatever. As long as that people obeyed what they were supposed to do, then there was supposed to be peace. Of course, now with the this covenant is with the Creator, God Almighty, and so he's not going to fudge on his part of it like earthly kings would do. And so but we use the idea of shalom, peace, but shalom also means so much more. It means fulfillment. It means completeness. And so here God is going to say, I'm going to give you completeness and fulfillment, and this whole theme of redemption and salvation comes together in the end times with the descendant of David. So the redemption of Israel will be complete in the Messianic age. So the provisions of this covenant that Ezekiel mentioned here would include removing the threats to the Israelites' safety from the land, so they could even live in peace in formerly dangerous parts of the land, and for example, wilderness in the woods. And in today's world, it would be, okay, what about Golan Heights or Gaza or right up on the Lebanese border? Well, in the coming kingdom, there will no longer be a Lebanese border, because the border of Israel will go all the way up to the Euphrates River. And so these areas will be safe and secure. I will make them and the places around my hill a blessing. I will cause the rain to come down in its season. There will be showers of blessing. The tree of the field will yield its fruit. The ground will yield its produce. They will be secure in their land. So, secondly, God is going to make his people and the places around his hill. What's his hill? Mount Zion, around Jerusalem, a blessing to others. And God's seasonal blessings on Israel, both the people and the land, would be like the rain that would fall in the proper season at the proper amounts, and he would send down his blessing down on them in showers, and fruit trees would bear abundantly, and fruits and vegetables and flowers would proliferate throughout the land. And there's lots of references to that in Hosea 2, Joel 3, Amos 9, Zechariah 8. These it says even the plants would be secure. So they wouldn't have to worry about landslides and drought and or too much water, too little water, too much sun, too little sun. Even the plants would be secure. So eventually Israel will be free of her enemies. Now, then they will know that I am Adonai when I have broken the bars of their yoke and have delivered them from the hand of those who enslaved them. They will no longer be prey to the nations. The beasts of the earth will not devour them. They will live in security. No one will make them afraid. I will make their agriculture renowned. They will no longer be consumed with hunger in the land. They will no longer bear the scorn of the nations. So thirdly, God said when God breaks that yoke that held his people in captivity and freed them from their oppressors, they would know that he is the Lord God that did this. Now, said the Israelites were going to live in complete security. They would no longer be a prey to the nations or the beasts of the earth that previously had devoured them. And the beasts may be probably as a figure for the Gentile nations that always sought to devour Israel, no matter where they were. The Israelites could live without fear of abuse. God would provide for them a place where they could put down roots, a place where they would become famous, and famines and insults of other nations would cease forever. Now, I think there's probably that a lot of that is going to be in the millennium. So there are actually 17 I wills in verses 11 to 29. You can go back and count them, where God says, I will, I will, I will. And so we know that God cannot lie. So what he says is going to happen. It's going to happen. Some of these things are already happening today. And so he said agriculture will flourish. And brother, it really is. It already is. Here's some pictures that I've got some pictures that I took that they're not as good as these pictures. So we were there at a time of the year where the plants were just they were coming up, but it wasn't anything like this. And so you can see that looks like to me that looks like squash that's growing, and that's those zucchinis or something like that. Yeah, according to those leaves, that's what that would be. That'd be squash. And then they're growing tomatoes, and a lot of places in Israel, they have built just hundreds of acres under protection, kind of like a greenhouse. And so they're growing them in a greenhouse, and so they can grow these tomatoes like that. And that just makes me insanely jealous looking at these pictures here, that they can make those they could grow tomatoes like that. When I went out to my garden, what type of tomatoes are those? There would be a type of a grape tomato, or a lobe, like a cherry tomato, something like what we would call a cherry, yes, a cherry tomato, something like that. And I went out there in my garden this morning early, and I'm looking around, and I was quite surprised. I found one little tomato that because with this heat, they're blooming all over the place, but they're just not setting fruit. And so this it just makes me very jealous. And then of course the palm trees in the rows like this. They're just that's something to see. Olive trees that are just growing in groves were really something to be seen. Also, it's just I love the agriculture in Israel, and a couple of times they had to send somebody after me because I'd wandered off looking at how they were growing their crops, and as a result of all that, that's why I put drip irrigation in my garden, and boy, am I glad I did. Otherwise, my garden would be a desert today because I definitely used that drip irrigation to good effect. And then this picture down here on the right-hand side, right, bottom right, that is a picture around the kibbutz, and these radial, where they've radiated the fields, not radiated them, but it's a radial pattern around the kibbutz where they've integrated the pasture land, agriculture, and cattle, goats, sheep, along with various types of agriculture. It's almost kind of like the classic example of what we would call permaculture, or the integrated agriculture, where you use all of the different aspects of animal husbandry and crop rotation and all of those different things. To you take the manures from the animals, and you put them in the compost, and then you put it in the fields, and you grow the big plants or the grasses, and then the cows come in there and they eat it. Whatever, it's sustainable, and it's just a great way to do. And so today I was even reading on some stuff about Israel and how they how Israel is maybe not feeding the world, but helping people feed themselves in different ways, from everything from seed research to desalinization to just all sorts of things that they are doing nowadays, and teaching people how to grow things. They had this one little thing. I was watching it where they had rows of lettuce, but each block of lettuce was in this little plastic tray kind of thing, where and it had little veins. I mean, little things sticking up, little veins sticking up. And what that did was that collected the morning dew, and every bit of that morning dew then collected on these veins and then dripped down around the plant, so nothing was lost. And so they had great looking tomatoes, lettuces, and so forth. And so it was just really fascinating to see some of these things that they're doing, and the research that's going into agriculture, and a very big percentage, not anywhere near all of it or anything like that, but a large significant percentage of the produce that is consumed in Europe comes from Israel. And so when they started doing the BDS thing with saying we're going to boycott Israel, then some cooler heads prevail and says, wait, where are we going to get our oranges and bananas and coconuts and pomegranates and grapes and cherries? All that stuff is grown in Israel. And so then they decided, well, maybe that's not a very good idea. So they back to buying stuff from Israel. But that's all prophesied. God prophesied this, in 580. This is 587 BCE. That this would happen 2,500 years later. A lot of Israel has returned to the land, and that land that was so desolate is now looking like this kibbutz down here. In the 1800s, when Mark Twain visited Israel, he commented on how dry and uninhabitable it was, and how could anyone ever hope to live here. And so you see that right there. What a beautiful place that is. So let's go ahead. It says, they will know that I, Adonai, their God, am with them. They, the house of Israel, are my people. It is a declaration of Adonai. So Adonai would be their God. He would, and they would be his special people. I mean, that's in the fullest sense that that the nation had ever experienced. I mean, it's going to get better and better for Israel. And they're going to go through a bad time. Okay, we know that before the millennial period, Israel is going to be almost destroyed, and that's when Yeshua is going to come back in and rescue them, destroy their enemies, and at that point, they will know that it was Yeshua, the one who they had pierced, the one they had rejected, was their Messiah, and they missed it. So, but God says everyone will know that I am He. I'm Adonai, and so they're going to learn. They will see that we're God's people, and He has taken care of us, and so it will be a great day for that. Now, we know that throughout history, Israel, once they came back from Babylonian captivity, they were not free for very long, because the Greeks came in, and then let's see, they came back. They were able to rebuild somewhere around 400 BCE. Well, in 333, Alexander came through, and so they've always been under the control of like the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, finally the Romans, and then the Romans destroyed the city. They kicked everybody out, and so they've had their times. But I think these verses have that millennial conditions in view, and what we see is today that this is just a premonition. This is a preview of what Israel is going to be like in the millennium, and that's going to be a grand and glorious thing. So you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, you are human, and I am your God. It is a declaration of Adonai. So the sheep in view, God has now, he's declared, okay, we're not talking about sheep here, guys. We're not talking about, Baba black sheep and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about people, and not real sheep. And so he was describing the relationship that he was going to have with them as people, using the metaphor of this shepherd and the sheep. So he's just clearing it up for him. So now going ahead, I added some stuff on the end here, and I got a couple of minutes, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. In interpretation of Ezekiel. Now, we're going to be running into, as we progress, we're going to be running into times where we're going to have trouble with literal interpretation. Okay, but what does it say in black and white? Does it say black and white? Was God talking about real sheep here and real shepherds? No, that's pretty obvious, but other times it's not going to be so obvious. So I thought, well, let's look at a couple of different or three groups, broad general groups, and this is not this is not cut and dry, it's not set in stone, but the interpretations of scripture. You've got the literalist that it is what it says, no interpretation, no figures of speech, and it's just it's a view of the Karaite view, or the view that, okay, whatever it says in black and white, that's what it means, and that's what it is, and there's nothing beyond that. And so these people tend to be more the premillennialists. And then you got those kind of literalists that, okay, they recognize, they see what it is in black and white, but they also realize that, okay, when when they're talking about sheep and goats, he was talking about people, or the sheep with the sheep. He was talking about the leaders that had been people that have been leaders and now they're just sheep like everybody else. And so they also kind of tend to be premillennialists. And then you got these literalists that believe that prophetic language, you just can't see it literally. It's out there. It's something, and then what that you just can't apply to everyday life. It's not meant to be, everyday life. And so they tend to use the New Testament as the New Testament to interpret the Old Testament rather than the other way around. And so they see an end time. They don't see an end time future for the Jews. Okay, these are the supersessionists, the replacement theology people, and they tend, and like I said, all of these there's no clear boundaries here, but they tend to be amillennial or post-millennial. Now, you may ask me, okay, what does all that mean? Well, let's go to the next slide here. The amillennial people say that we're currently living in the millennial reign, and which I don't see how they can see that, because there sure is a lot of wars and rumors of wars, and I don't see Yeshua reigning from Jerusalem. The premillennials, that the 1,000-year reign of the actual millennial period is going to begin with the return of the Messiah. And then the post-millennial that says that, okay, Yeshua is going to come back after a period of Christian prosperity and dominance in the world. And so that I have a little problem with that kind of theology too. And dispensational. Dispensational says that the 1,000-year reign will begin after the third return of the Messiah. The what? The third return, meaning that Messiah is going to
correct my head on that, because
okay, well, I'm going to tell you here. He's going to the Messiah is going to come back and take the church out of the world, and then there's going to be the years of tribulation and so forth, and then after that tribulation, he's going to come back down and begin the millennial reign. So that would be like, okay, he's coming back for the church in the rapture, and then coming later on for to save Israel and destroy the bad guys and begin his millennial reign. And so that's what a dispensational is. Now, I know these are, admittedly, these are just thumbnail sketches, and you can shoot all sorts of holes in them, and the boundaries between all of these are sometimes fluid and well beyond what I'm prepared to time-wise to even speak about tonight. But I thought it's something that you need to be aware of as we go forward in the study, because a lot of it from here on out is going to be eschatological. It's going to be end times view, end times study, and it will be a time of trying to sort between what is literal and what was meant for that day, and then what is meant for however long in the future that we are in. Actually, we're living toward the end times now. So